where we talk about all things travel, Brazil, and just anything that has to do with personal freedom, which is my passion and my specialty. Um, Glad to be here today on a Monday. I had quite a whirlwind of a weekend, and the reason being is because I knew that this week would be one of a more, I don't want to say solemnity, but more, fasting, cleansing, and preparing myself. Like I said on the title of the video, we are in preparation for an upcoming ayahuasca ceremony next Saturday. For those of you who are not familiar with ayahuasca, it is a plant medicine that comes from the Amazons. So that means, the Amazons here in Brazil, Peru, and kind of all the countries here in South America that host Amazons, portions of it. Um, will have a practice of working with a couple of different plants and roots to um, create a potion, basically. And this is a potion that typically you would take under the supervision and guidance of a shaman, someone who is versed in going into other realms in order to, kind of help to reintegrate and assist people in a purging process that allows them to kind of step into the next level of their lives, right? And so ayahuasca for me, this will not be my first journey. It's actually, I've had several, but this will be the first one in several years. And I'm excited about it because I had taken a good long time off, 3 years or so, because the last time that I partook, it was kind of harrowing. It wasn't, and it's not always going to be all beautiful colors and rainbows. And certainly my last journey was not that. And so, I wanted to talk a little bit about what it looks like living in Brazil, a place that is the main kind of host of the Amazons, and where, ayahuasca is widely used for spiritual, um, I would say spiritual refreshing, spiritual cleansing, spiritual upgrading. Um, and, it's a very common practice here, even in the cities of Brazil. Pretty much all around this country, there are people that gather, usually under the assistance of a shaman, um, to partake in the medicine. So, why, excuse me, why, why do this kind of thing, instead of just living a normal life and what have you? I think for me, I had been called early on to use plant medicine because of the type of childhood that I had that was just so disjointed and broken that, there wasn't going to be much chance of me having a good life if I hadn't pulled on some tools pretty early on. So I have always kind of taken a variety of plant medicines. I mean, obviously, I'm from California, so I started out with canna, right? And went from there. So I have used a variety of plant medicines, shrooms, psilocybin, definitely peyote, so, buttons, what we call hickory in Mexico, um, hape, different things. And it's not, people act like they think you got a problem or you're an escapist or something. No, it's not about that. It's that some of us, especially those of us who had to come through the experience of intense childhood trauma, it's like you don't really. It's kind of hard to bounce back from that stuff. Once you have come from a foundation where you didn't have a lot of the things that a child should have in place, and you still want to be a fully elevated and functioning and healthy grown person that's able to have some success in their lives and create goodness, and you expect to do that from that space of nothingness, it can be really hard. And so that was just a call that I had. And I would say, they say people who have a shamanic calling on their lives usually will go through a lot of trauma. And so for me, it was just something that I knew was going to help me to do the levels of release that needed to be done, kind of more in a more safe space than trying to utilize therapy or some of these earthly kind of Western practices that at the end of the day aren't necessarily going to the root, because the root is spiritual. And these therapies, they don't really address the spirit. And so, and yes, there are spiritual therapies, but something like going to a church therapist is not going to do it for me. And plus I'm not Christian anyway. So um, I did the work, and I've done a lot of work, and I can honestly say that it's through the utilizing of plant medicines that been able to become like a good mother and a good person, and all of these things I formerly was not. I was never terrible, but I wasn't. I didn't. I definitely have had to grow a lot in life, and I was not a good mother for many years, and I was not a good person in general, mostly. So, so I'm so grateful. Like I said, I wasn't the worst, but I definitely needed to really, really come into a groundedness in my life, because I was just such a very, very much angry person, very angry. And so that anger can be very self destructive. And so, and that just, that's what happens when, there's high levels of abandonment from parental figures and stuff like that. And on top of all the traumas. So it's been a blessing, because I feel like in a lot of ways I say the medicine, along with Ifa and the Yoruba tradition, have truly saved my life this lifetime, right? And just being able to work with those practices and and to grow with them over decades now, So in my preparation phase, a part of how you prepare for the actual taking of the potion, the medicine, is, going into more of an austerity period, particularly the week before. So, more of a fasting stage. You don't have to stop eating, but you're not going to be eating, meats, fatty foods, foods that irritate the system, foods that cause inflammation in the body. You're going to back off of some of that stuff. Not to say those things always cause those things, but I'm just saying we know what foods are light and easy on the gut and on the energy, and which ones take a little bit more, right? Doesn't mean you don't want to have, meats and things like that in the mix from time to time, but you also need to know when to ease off. And so preparing in this week prior to is just a process of easing off of things, no wine, no drinking, some of the things that I like sometimes, and just really being more centered in more of a meditation about, what is coming, how you want it to go, and what kind of experience you want to have. And so that is um, what I'm into right now. So starting today, eating fruits, fresh vegetables. I'm not going to really do much cooking, because I don't want to disturb the cellular structure of the food. I just want, the purity of the food this week. Um, juicing. So juicing is a big one for me. Sometimes I don't have time to get it all the way in. I have to have people bring me juices and stuff, but juicing has been a major healer in my life. So fresh organic juice, as well as, herbs, because I am a community herbalist. So working with herbal medicines that will kind of stimulate, release through the liver, through the kidneys, and just kind of just letting go of a lot of things. Um, and I had already been doing some anti-parasite cleanses over the last few weeks up to now, just to prepare for this time, because I knew I had been planning for a couple of months now. So that is kind of what my week will look like, and with hopes that this time I will have an experience that is not something that would turn me off of the medicine, kind of like how the last one did, but will help me, that I will be able to over time integrate it in a positive way. Now, the last time I journeyed, due to the circumstances around me that were not as organized as I was used to, the journey ended up kind of going awry. Now, that doesn't mean you don't get anything good in the experience over time, just because you don't have the most pleasant experience while you're on the medicine, but it does mean that it kind of puts a little bad taste in your mouth about going further with it, right? And so at that time, I was up north in Bahia a few years ago in a town called Itacare that me and my children were living in. Wonderful town, Afro Bahian, had everything you could want, like a paradise, right? And I had some friends up there that were, they weren't shamans, and that's the first thing. I wasn't, it wasn't a shamanic ceremony, which is what I'm used to. In other words, straight shamans from the Amazon. It was actually some folks who had used the medicine, for years and years and were part of more of like a Santo Daime sect, which is more of a cult that surrounds the medicine. But I didn't know that at the time. And I don't do anything in the cultish perspective or around that. And so they were they were very nice people, but the discernment maybe wasn't the best because they had some energies there, specifically some Israeli people that I didn't know who these people were, and they were throwing me off, from Jump Street energetically. So at that point, I probably could have just got up and said, I'm not feeling this. But, sometimes when you sign up for things, you want to like see it through. So I went ahead and sat it out. And sure enough, as the medicine was kicking in, I had those energies around me that were very invasive. So there was no real structure to how they were doing the ceremony. And so instead of them holding their own and staying within their own fields, they were like kind of coming towards me, which I really, really did not. I wasn't comfortable with. And that wasn't the whole time, but it was just moments of that, to the point where I moved away from them and I went off somewhere by myself. And, you're waiting for this stuff to wear off. It can be very concerning, right? Because you're just waiting for this stuff to wear off and you ain't really not feeling that great about the environment you're in. So that wasn't nice. I was totally safe there. Those were nice people, but um, because of the lack of discernment around who came in, or my experiencing of who came in, it just wasn't pleasant for me. So I had really vetted the group that I'm going to be working with this time in a major way. And I feel more comfortable with them, you know. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to, kind of getting back on the bike. I feel like, the medicine is so powerful, it's so healing. And I will say, despite how kind of dark the coloring of my last journey was, it was very much probably the deepest integration period I've ever had. So integration being the time after you have sat with the medicine, in which you kind of try to make some kind of sense of what you experience and what it means, to you and on your life. And so it took several months. I will say I was a little heavy afterwards, but it took several months, a long time, for me to integrate everything. But it impacted and changed my life in a major, major way, especially my relationships with how I was relating with my kids and some of the things, because I still, like I said, had that old energy on me to a degree still, even though I have been using medicine here and there over the years. It takes time, and multiple uses sometimes to kind of strip down some of these layers that we build around ourselves to protect ourselves. Because, in my case, I wasn't protected as a child, and just bobbing around hoping to stay alive, right? So we're whole grown adults that should have been, creating a different experience and environment for me and for my sibling and whatever. So um, that is kind of what we're preparing for right now. And I'm excited. For those who are judgmental about using the plant medicines, I mean, to each their own. That calling is not for everybody. Some people just don't even need it. And then you have people who think it's a recreational thing, which it is not. You wouldn't want to go into this medicine on a recreation mentality. It doesn't mean you'll have a bad experience. but it's just not a good approach. And so when we do ceremony, shamanic ceremonies, we start off with the use of hafe, which is some plants and herbs that are finely ground into a powder and go through a whole long process. And they clear out your head. They blow them into your nasal passage, and it just kind of clears your head, opens you up to, higher experiences, right? And then after that, you'll sit with some of the drink, the actual ayahuasca drink, which again is a combination of a couple of different plants from the Amazons. And I have done what we call medicina da floresta, ayahuasca, in various places. Definitely been out in nature and different places like that, and it's always wonderful in nature. I love it. But sometimes it's okay to just do it in, safe spaces, even if it's urban or even if it's, in a small town or something. You don't always have to be out in the jungle. A lot of people think it's only jungle medicine. It is medicine from the jungle. So obviously, it's probably the best to do it there. But it can also be very kind of disturbing because there are certain jungle imprints on the medicine. So, you will have experiences potentially with certain animals like panthers and things like that in your visioning that could throw you off. And if you're in the actual jungle where those things could actually be, you could go through some levels of terror, right? So it's not, like I said, it's not for everyone. There are levels of terror that you can be exposed to, um, just as you're grappling with, some of the deeper kind of fears we have about death, about succumbing to different things in life. We all have those fears. And so ayahuasca means little death. That's what it means. So there's an aspect of you having to face your mortality, period. And a lot of people will be in contact with their ancestors during the process. I definitely have been in contact with my grandmother that raised me. Um, the last journey I had that wasn't that pleasant, her energy was really strong. And she wasn't really that pleased with me. And she wasn't that kind of grandmother. She was very supportive and sweet, but she was kind of, that grandmother energy was coming through. Okay. And ayahuasca is a grandmother type of energy. And so I was getting checked, honey, but it was what I needed because she's gone. She's on the other side. And I really don't have guidance and elders that I deal with like that. Very much like on my own with my children. So it was a blessing. It's a blessing to be able to access that consult, even if I have to take certain medicines and things to really, really tune into it. Even though, as someone who is a practitioner and works with traditional African spirituality, I definitely, know how to be more in contact and connected to the ancestors. But, ayahuasca is a different level. So So that is what we have going. I'm going into my cleansing. I probably won't do a straight water fast, but I may up to the point. But I don't want to, because you do purge when you take ayahuasca, as in you will vomit. Um, some people don't even vomit physically, they might vomit energetically. But you will go through, the first thing you go through is a purge. It's very uncomfortable, to the point where everybody will have their own purging buckets, but you really don't care because you're so focused on what you're going through, right? um so yeah, you do some purging up front, which is always wonderful. We all could use that. I live in a big city. I've been through a lot of shit. You know what I mean? It's like it's endless purging that will need to happen, right? So that's fine. But yeah, we go through the purging process, and then after the purge, it's when the medicine kicks in. And you don't want to not vomit. You want to vomit. Like, I remember the first time I had the medicine, I was in California, in NorCal, and I was working with a shaman from Ecuador. It was wonderful. I had some of my loved ones, my friends around me. It was great. But I didn't want to vomit. I was holding in. And I remember I was sitting next to this powerful brother. He was a trip, but he was powerful. And he just kept trying to coax me to release. He could tell I was holding on too tight. I didn't want to let go. And once I went ahead and let go is when the medicine really took root. And I was able to have the experiences that were needed for me to, really go into the level of healing that I was seeking and the reason why I was even there. So it ended up being beautiful, but you have to be willing to let go. And once you let go, that's when the healing begins, right? Um, so it's beautiful. I'm really looking forward to it. It's a gorgeous experience. A lot of times there will be, the shaman will be singing what they call ikaro, which are songs, little spiritual songs that work along with the medicine. So they'll be singing the ikaro. Um, it's so beautiful. And maybe even playing music, playing guitar, percussion, and really just guiding you with the music. And you just go where you go, and you go through your process, and it takes a few hours. And yeah, I don't know if anyone, most people are not drawn to this lifestyle, but if you are, it is an option here in Brazil. You can contact me if you're interested. But I highly suggest it for those, especially those who feel really stuck in life and are trying to move through maybe, very serious traumas, addictions, things like that. Okay. So anyway, I'm gonna get off of here, but thanks y'all. Peace and love.